Hey, Gwen and Betty, welcome. You guys are the
Hi,
first
Andrea.
ones.
Hello.
Oh boy, good.
I'm just gonna be everybody in, and how y'all doing?
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
it's one of those.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, from if you saw the post I put, Portland is not the place.
Oh my gosh. Can you go outside? I didn't see the post. Can you go outside?
Well, this is here. Let's see if you can see. I mean, it's just, I don't know if you can tell. It's just like really heavy, thick air, and your, eyes are burning and your nose is stuffy. Okay, hold on. I got to let everybody in here. This is going to be hard to be letting people into the group. I'll have to stop periodically because I need my hands to do the goniometers and at the same time let it in here. So.
Are you gonna go to California? Is that where you're heading?
Well, no. So I was in LA, combination of visiting my son and finishing up some videos and pictures and such. And there, now I can see everybody. Hi. And I flew back to Portland 2 days ago. And I mean, I knew what I was going into, but when you're coming in and Portland itself is not on fire, but the fires are about 30 miles from here. And it's just, it's hard to not just break down crying and, add it to all of the other garbage that we're all dealing with as a community, as a world. Not much fun. But here's the positive thing. People still have cancer. That's not the positive part, but they need our help, and there will be more of us to help them. And we have new ways in which to do so. We've been kind of forced into this virtual world. Brenda, I'm not sure I can concentrate. Brenda says, I don't know how you can concentrate right now. If my husband's actually my subject for today, and if you asked him, he'd say, I'm a bitch on wheels. So I'm like, I lost a package that I had to return with a pair of expensive ski pants in it. I'm tearing the house apart today, and probably not a very pleasant person. And then I find them sitting in my daughter's room. I'm like, son of a gun. So this is Jeff. He's our subject, and then this is Kai Kai, and she's the one who keeps me sane. And this is my log cabin bedroom. So this is my happy place. We tore off the roof a couple years ago, and my husband gave me my upstairs dream home. So we're doing it in here because I'm actually going to show you guys that we can do this anywhere, and a bed is a good place. Believe it or not, to actually have them do the measurements. So we'll do a little bit of upright, and then we'll do it in supine position. I just want to, I guess it's time we get rolling, and then I'm just going to have to check every now and again to make sure that people get admitted in. Unfortunately, this is one of those hands-on ones, so I'll just have to be a little interrupted. So come on over. This is Jeff. Hello. My hubby, who's volunteered to do this multiple times. He's like, do I have to do this again? I'm like, you're the only one here. So hold on, let me let these guys in. And I apologize in advance. I would not doubt that my dog is going to jump up on the bed with him as soon as we do this. So that'll add to the flavor. But in reality, this is what you're going to be dealing with. So I'm going to show you how you can do this, whether you're with people in person or, we're doing it virtually. Now, here's a question. Did any of you guys, I know I saw one person, dogs are always excused, cool. I know somebody posted a picture, I think Lori, that got the goniometers. So if you don't have them, these are our little goniometers, the mommy and the baby. Kind of hard to see. I'm sorry about the overhead light, but it's so dark in our city that if I don't have all these lights on, you surely will not be able to see me. So as you can see here, we've got the 6-inch and the 12-inch. The 6-inch is much flimsier. This is much more durable. So for the purposes of, actual hands-on doing this, I always use the 12-inch for multiple reasons. One, it's very sturdy, and you won't be replacing these every couple months, where some of these ones that are a little bit more flimsy, what happens is eventually they won't hold their position, and that doesn't do you any good. That gives you a lot of extra work. Also, just want to start off, I know that everybody, a lot of people, including myself, are very confused with where is the FAS stuff, where is the CES stuff, and I talked to Dan Ritchie this morning, and this doesn't help you guys one bit, but I said for future workshops like this, let's put everything on one site. So, you know, this was a trial. You guys are the guinea pigs, and I apologize. We'll be indebted to you. But, you know, we learned a lot about the confusion with this, and perhaps not having the extra stuff on the Facebook group. It was all well intended, but I apologize for the extra confusion. And also, if you didn't see my lovely post this morning with the big plume of smoke, I have to get out of here on Thursday morning. That was the earliest flight I could get. So I'm rescheduling I think it's postural assessments we were supposed to do will be on Tuesday. So you'll have Dan Monday and me Tuesday. But the best thing is every day I'm making sure in the announcements on that silly Facebook page that I'm putting the link. So if you can't find it, you can't find the emails, you don't know where the heck to go, just make sure you just go to the Facebook page, and that link will be there. As for all your functional aging course materials, it is on the functional aging learning management platform. All your cancer exercise specialist stuff is on your ceti.teachable.com. So, you know, we'll figure out some bonus thing for all your guys' trouble in helping us to figure out that this is not a very viable way of doing it. And we'll be putting it all together. Okay, Betty, you're saying you can't get onto the Facebook page now. Why don't you email me, if you will, at CETI, actually, what's the easiest one? Let's do CETI Guru, GURU @gmail.com, and then I'll just send you the link to the Facebook page. Exactly. All right, so that being said, in your CES manuals, whether they're downloadable, now don't wreck your car while you're driving. This is awesome. She's driving down the road. In your CES manuals, you'll get to the section on goniometric measurements, and everything is laid out there. It's gonna, if you guys can all make sure your mics are muted, I'll probably have to go through here. Okay, I think I got that one muted. Mute. Okay, I think we're good. It's all going to be outlined for you. So we're going to start off by talking about what are the three parts of the goniometer. So I don't know, I don't, if you can show me a thumbs up or whatever. Have you all ever used one of these? Thumb up. Okay, I'm assuming most people haven't. Okay, of course, while you're driving. Okay, well, that's kind of cool because I get to teach you from scratch. And keep in mind that everybody may do it a little bit differently, but the basic principles don't change. So the part that is solid, so it's got this circle part, dial, if you will, and the arm attached. This is called your stationary arm, okay? Where the movement arm, just like hands on a clock, moves, in this case with the arm, as we're taking the measurement. And this little centerpiece here is our axis of rotation. Now, if you notice, and again, I apologize for the lighting, but there just is no natural light in Portland right now. We've got three sets of numbers. The red ones on the outside and the inside are hard to read, but guess what? We don't need to use them. We're using these ones in black. On any goniometer, you want to find the numbers that go from 0 to 180, because essentially we know that this is 180 degrees and this is 90 degrees. So when you are looking after you take a measurement, and let's say, for example, you were reading the wrong end, and so let's say this is actually 124 degrees, but if I look at the wrong side, it tells me 56 degrees. So when you look at this, knowing that this is 90 degrees, you know that it can't be 56 because the arm would be right here. So we know that it's got to be over 90. So even if you're having a really hard time figuring it out, just the process of elimination will help you. This is confusing at first. It's very simple once you understand the logistics. More than anything, you're probably going to feel like you need an extra set of arms. So it's always good to have a pocket that you can just kind of put it in while you're taking the measurements. But practice, practice, practice. Keep in mind with this, we are not looking for the best of 3 or even doing this multiple times, because when you think of the majority of these people will be recovering actively from surgery, or you know, they've recovered long ago, but you know, maybe have scar tissue or adhesions, limited range of motion, it's uncomfortable. So having them hold their arm in a position, you know, most people are going to try and push a little further than they should. We want to be able to, one, support their arm while we're taking the measurement, and two, not have them do it 3 times. So no warm up is required or even desired, really. I just want to do this on cold muscles to see what their accurate measurement is. And of course, the more times we do it, it's going to improve each time. That's not what we're looking for. So we're going to measure 5 planes of motion: flexion, extension, abduction, internal and external rotation of the shoulder joint. This is primarily used for breast cancer or cancers of the head and neck. However, if you all are working with athletes or anybody who's had any kind of shoulder surgery, this is a very viable assessment tool that you can add to your arsenal. Because it does take a bit of time and a bit of practice, what I suggest is this, and I'm maybe moving this back and forth a little bit. So let me get, so you're not staring at my ceiling. I would have somebody just stand here and I would tell them to raise their arms up straight overhead, and you're gonna have to cue them, okay? So you're looking just like you're looking at me and you're giving me direction. So if you notice my arm goes out to the side, you're gonna say, Andrea, I need you to back down a little to that point where your arm went out to the side. So as I'm doing this, guys, lighting and all, can you see how I'm shifting my arm? So I'm going out of pure flexion into abduction. And this is the way that a lot of people cheat. You know, they want to get that great score, but they shift. You'll see them move their shoulder. They'll do that little alteration. But what I'm looking for here is basically to see, is there a big disparity, big discrepancy between the 2 arms? Or if we know, I'm going to give this one away to you right now, that norm is like 150 to 180. If they can't even get their arms up to here, 2 things. One, they probably have frozen shoulder, which I'm not going to diagnose them with, but I'll probably recommend that they go to a physical therapist or a physiotherapist in conjunction with working with me. I'll work on everything else. But also that's going to dictate to me that, yeah, I need to take out this goniometer and go through the steps to take the measurements. Whereas if I was, you know, working with somebody who aced it all the way around, then it's really a colossal waste of time. So in the back, I believe in the back of module 4, and also when you go to your CETI.teachable, when you look in your learning management platform, after all of the modules, there's a little part that says forms. And this is where you can actually download the forms so you don't have to recreate them. In there is an assessment page, which is awesome because it's going to have the postural assessment, modified Thomas test, all of these things are in there, and all you have to do is check yes, no, and then fill in the numbers as you take the measurements. So, you know, I am having a hard time myself seeing with the lighting. Part of it could be because I'm blind without my reading glasses, but hopefully you guys can see okay. It's not too bad. Okay. All right. So flexion and extension. Come on, Jeff. The axis of rotation is going to be in the same place, which I'll show you how to find. And I'm going to show you this standing up, and then I'm actually going to have him lie down, which will make it easier to see. The majority of times when we're taking measurements in supine position, it is a reflection of flexibility and range of motion as opposed to strength. Now, this is not 100% one way or the other. My fellow Portlandian Tracy just hopped on. We were sharing weather or fire stories earlier. Welcome, Tracy. Glad you could make it. So anyway, mostly it is, you know, we're looking at flexibility, range of motion, scar tissue, adhesions, that type of thing. Where when you are taking somebody's measurements in an upright position, because there is more of a gravitational force that they're working against, oftentimes that's a reflection of strength. So while neither one of them is 100%, Typically, I start by taking the measurements supine, because if they have limited range of motion supine, then more than likely we need to work on range of motion activities and stretches, going through the various planes of motion before we even consider adding a load. So if, I don't know how many of you actually have a book in front of you, but if you look at flexion, the norm is 150 to 180. So your client must have at least 90% of the bottom number before you put a weight in their hand, a band, a Pilates reformer, or even have them hold something like a Warrior One. So that means they have to have at least 135 degrees of range of motion in flexion before you add resistance. So that's the number one concept. It trumps everything else. We don't do, I mean, you can certainly do balance exercises and that type of thing, but we definitely are not doing any type of strength training until they have that range of motion. Okay, so that being said, I'm gonna zoom you in here. I'm gonna have Jeff lie down and yeah, on your back with your knees bent. So yes, this is a bed. And you know, the issues with the bed, of course, is that it's a little bit squishy because it's a Tempur-Pedic. So it's not gonna be perfect. But what you need to keep in mind is that if you take these measurements initially on the bed, supine, knees bent, and you take them again in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, all we're looking for is a subjective improvement where Jeff is today and where Jeff is 3 months from now. We use the norms as a guide, but I don't care how he, you know, stacks up against the rest of the world. That means nothing to me. I want to know that the exercises that I am choosing are helping to reach our goal, which in this particular case will be to increase range of motion. And think about all the people who don't have cancer, you know, who are just the aging population, who for whatever reason, you know, stop using it and they lose it, you know, don't use it, you lose it. So they've lost their range of motion. They're unable to reach into a cupboard or, you know, do many of the things that they're required to do on a day-to-day basis. All right, so let's zoom in a bit here. Now, if you are instructing your client to do this virtually, then of course you're going to be just like me. You're going to be telling them to fiddle around, move the camera, move the computer, and that's okay. In real life, ideally, you would do this on like a massage table, but you can certainly do it on a hard floor as well. And I'll tell you what to look for. The easiest way to determine where this, here, so Jeff, scooch back. I need your feet up on the bed, please. So you always want to make sure that your client has their knees bent. So that's going to help to come to a neutral spine, because if his legs, he doesn't know what knees bent means. Bend the knees, baby.
You want me to do that now?
Yeah, I want him to do it now. So when the knees are, feet on the ground, feet on the bed. There you go. He's trying to keep our bed clean from his shoes. This is going to put his spine in neutral, okay? If somebody's legs are extended, they have a greater likelihood that they're going to arch their back as they're trying to reach up further. So this neutralizes the spine. That's the first thing I want to make sure. The other thing is, you know, try and keep the thighs parallel, make sure that they're not knock-kneed or they're not falling out to the side. That doesn't matter that much, but the more we can keep everything in alignment, I think the better results we get. Also, once I start to take the measurements, I want to make sure that he is looking up. If he looks towards me on the computer, like if he's trying to talk to me or even if we're in person, it's going to affect his range of motion. Now, because you guys, so if you have your little goniometer, okay, I want you to follow along with me and take this little 6-inch. You can, if you have a big computer, you can use a 12-inch, but I have a little computer. And kind of play along with me, and let's see if you get the same measurements, holding it right up to the computer screen. I'll try and get out of the way. And every time I've done this, it's worked beautifully. We're all within about 2 degrees of one another. Okay, so make sure I'm going to get as close as possible here. There we go. All right, so to find the axis of rotation, which in your book says, you know, at the acromion, the head of the humerus, the best thing you can do, obviously, if you're in person, you can actually feel this little indentation. If you bring the arm out to the side, because where the humerus goes into the shoulder girdle, there's that space right there. And that's what you're feeling for. If you are doing this, just like we are right now, you're going to just kind of eyeball that spot. And you're going to line up your axis of rotation right there. You want to instruct your client to keep their arm close to their body. And what I tell them is to think of 2 panes of glass, so that as his arm is moving upwards, it's between 2 panes of glass, so he can't go out to the side, which would put him into abduction. And then we're not going to get a true measure of flexion. And the other part of this, I told you that I don't care how he compares to the rest of the world. But what I do want to make sure is that my measurements are accurate, so that if I'm sharing this information with a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or whomever, that we're essentially speaking the same language, so that they know, you know, where they're leaving off and I begin, or I know where I leave off and they begin. All right. Now, you know, with flexion, we're going to be going up and over. So if you want, you could just get that movement arm kind of out of the way and getting ready to go in that direction. And the stationary arm will always be parallel with the table, the bed, the floor. And you would do this same exact measurement. If he sat upright, I would keep this in the same position it's in. Only, you know, the stationary arm, instead of it being horizontal, it would be vertical, but otherwise it's exactly the same. And some people who cannot get in a supine position for whatever reason, we're going to do these measurements upright. There's no other way to do it. But you want to make sure that you note that on your assessment sheet, because the measurements will probably be very different. Okay, so follow along with me, guys. His thumb is pointing up to the ceiling as he slowly is going to take his arm up and over, and you may have to repeat the instructions multiple times, so just come into it being patient. He's looking, or with his eyes closed, his chin is pointing up. Okay, now I'm gonna have him pause for a second. This is where it gets a little bit tricky with the bed, because he kind of sinks into it. But what you want to do is you want to take a look and kind of memorize what the natural arch of the back looks like. Okay, so it's much easier on a hard, flat surface, but you are looking for excessive scapular movement or excessive lordosis. So do me a favor, Jeff, just crank your arm all the way back so that your back kind of arches too much right here. So it's hard to see because of this sofa. So unless somebody, not sofa, bed, unless somebody's here pushing the bed down, you're probably not going to pick it up. But just watch for elevation of the rib cage, watch for excessive scapular motion, and just do the best you can. That's all I can tell you right now under these circumstances, unless you're meeting with someone in person. Okay, so now let's do this for real. So go ahead, slowly, slowly, slowly. Okay. Now, although it appears that the axis of rotation isn't in the same place, I just keep holding it right there. My stationary arm stays parallel, and I'm going to take this movement arm right in between, you know, we're aiming for the epicondyles of the elbow, and see how this moved. I just move it back. It's okay. If I were to go on one side of his arm or the other, it would probably be off by 10 degrees. So a couple things. One, notice how I'm supporting his arm here. When you're doing this with somebody virtually, you're not going to do this slow like I'm doing, because their arm will be aching holding it in this position. But I'm actually supporting his arm, which is going to allow me to get an accurate measurement. Then I go ahead and just let him release his arm. So if you took that measurement with me, what you want to do is you want to go along your movement arm and look and see what that number is right there. So to give you an idea, I have 144 degrees. Let's see if you can see this. Okay, do you guys see that? Okay, so we know that the norm is 150 to 180, and that he has to be at least at 135 degrees before I would, let's say, you know, give him some weights and have him do a pullover or something like that. Now, let me check the chat box. I've got to just stop periodically and make sure you guys are Okay, placing screen on speaker view. So speaker view. Okay, hopefully that helps. Whoever just made that suggestion to me, let me know if that's more effective, because I don't know. All right, anybody have, can you guys see okay? Hopefully you guys are all okay. Oh, you're not talking to me about speaker view? Okay. All right, I take things very literally, guys. Okay, so does everybody understand how we did that? The axis of rotation right here, just, you know, at that insertion point, the glenohumeral area, the acromion, whatever you want to call it, no worries. Hold that there. Stationary arm is in line with his body and parallel to the floor, the bed, whatever. The movement arm moves as he's moving his arm. And all of these details are in your book. Always make sure thumb is leading, palm is facing the body for flexion. So these are going to vary with each different measurement. Okay, 150 to 180 is the norm. You want your client to be at 90% or better of the lower number. Okay, so from here, actually, while he's here, I'm going to, just because this is easy, I'm going to bring his arm out. So his elbow is accessible. He is just slightly less, like this would be parallel to the shoulder. I'm going to go a little lower so there's no impingement as we're doing this. The other thing that I want his elbow joint to remain at 90 degrees. I don't want this arm collapsing in or coming out here. So these are the things that I'm looking for. This is a really easy one. And for all intents and purposes, you don't even need to hold the goniometer while you're doing it, because the elbow is always going to be the axis of rotation. That's not going to change. So always make sure that your movement arm is on the outside. And if you screw it up and you do it backwards, it happens. Just take the measurement again, not the end of the world. So the axis of rotation is right there. Now, notice that if we were on a floor, this would not be possible, right? Admit somebody in here real quick, because it would have to come up because the floor would be here. So we would get a different measurement. That's why you always want to make sure that you're notating how you did it that particular time, okay? Because that could change it by 10 degrees. So preferably if you're doing it on a bed or a table, even a weight bench, the elbow is accessible and hanging off so that that axis of rotation is going to go right there. Now the stationary arm is always going to be perpendicular. So even once I take this measurement, if I can draw a straight line up to the ceiling, I'm just going to go back to that. Even if I lost my space or I needed both arms, whatever, easy to go back to. So axis of rotation at the elbow joint. Stationary arm is just in line with where his arm starts. Let's start with external rotation because that's the easier of the two. And keeping that 90-degree angle, he's going to rotate backwards, always making sure that your clients know they should not push past the point of pain. And if you cannot notice any movement in the lumbar area or scapular region, then look at their rib cage, because if they arch their back, if they're kind of cheating, you'll see elevation of the rib cage. So there are a number of ways that you can tell if they're overcompensating. So now, even though it looks like he's touching because his hands are going down, I don't care what his hand's doing. My measurement is simply to the epiphyses of the wrist. So can everybody see okay? So I've come back, I make sure my movement arm's on the outside, the axis of rotation is at the elbow, and then I very simply go right to the epiphyses. Everybody see that okay? Make sure that this is still straight up and down. So if you guys are measuring along with me on the computer, you just take that little goniometer of yours, make sure the stationary arm is vertical and that the movement arm is following right along here. Okay, go ahead and relax, Jeff. Then we come over to here. Let me look at the measurement first. And it's about 71 degrees. See that? Okay, so we know that the norm, well, you don't know yet because I didn't tell you. External rotation is 70 to 90. So he's at 71. If he were less than 63, then I would not be having him do any type of external rotation with weights or bands or cables. I'd be working on things that, and these are all in your book. You're going to see different exercises that will help to improve range of motion. I will tell you, despite the fact that these books were edited by the editor for the American Council on Exercise, they missed something. And you will find 2 exercises in there, and you'll know them when you see them, that say, I believe they say prone position, when in fact they're in supine position. So just cross that out and know that it's done in supine position, and they're in the range of motion section, okay? All right, now think about this. If he had had, let's say, a mastectomy, radiation, think about how difficult it's going to be to move backwards when you've got all this scar tissue or adhesions. It won't be the case for everybody, but if you can start to think about why somebody has limited range of motion, you know, what's going on there? Is it because there's a scar tissue buildup or adhesions? Is it a range of motion issue? Is it a strength issue? This is going to help you to determine what exercises you're doing. Because if I, go ahead and rest for a second, Jeff. If I thought that he should be doing weights and I started having him do external rotations, say with a cable or something, and if he didn't have adequate range of motion, then what's going to happen? He's going to get really strong just from here to here without ever getting that full range of motion. So that's why we came up with, you know, this 90% of the lowest number. When you hit that 90%, so let's go back to 150 to 180. When you're at 135, your client's at 135 degrees, yes, they can start doing resistance training, but that doesn't mean that they should stop doing stretches and stop doing things that will continue to increase their range of motion. If you're lucky enough to do these baseline measurements with a client or a patient before they have surgery, you're going to get a much more accurate depiction of how that surgery or radiation impacted them. More often than not, that's not going to happen, because from the time you're diagnosed with cancer to the time you're having surgery is usually pretty quick, or by the, you know, you're starting treatment. And the last thing people are thinking about is, oh yeah, let me go meet with my personal trainer or my physical therapist. In a perfect world, that would happen. And we'll talk about how to position yourself working in doctor's offices and actually, you know, being there. It's a great segue into working in a medical office and kind of building that know, like, and trust relationship with the doctor, is to offer to do these assessments prior to surgery, prior to treatment, and then as a follow-up, and do it pro bono to start with, but then that can work into you having a position working in the doctor's office, and possibly, depending on where you're at, even having the doctor do medical billing for you and then paying you. So if you're interested in learning more about that beyond what we teach in the course, hit me up and I'm happy to share some information with you. But otherwise, you can compare their affected side, meaning the side that had surgery to or radiation, to the unaffected side. So if their unaffected side can go to 180 degrees, then that can be their norm. If their unaffected side only goes to 150 degrees, then maybe that's the best we can expect from them. Does that make sense, you guys? I know I can't see most of you. I only get to see your names because you're being incognito. But Nikki, I see you. Thanks for playing. All right, so let's go on to internal rotation. Now this one's a little bit tricky, you guys. So we come back out, and we've got, make sure I don't drop my computer here. Same thing, right? The elbow's hanging off. This is going to be the axis of rotation, stationary arm, straight up and down. So the cheat on internal rotation, and this is easy when you're in person because you've got your hands and you can palpate and whatnot. But what you're going to be looking for is excessive protraction. So if you start to see even the wrinkles in his shirt start to bunch up here, and he's actively pushing down toward the bed, toward the table, towards the floor, then he's gone too far. In person, you're going to take your fingers and you're going to put them right there, like on his anterior delt or right below the clavicle, very gently. No pressure, just put your fingers there. And as soon as you feel a contraction of those muscles, or you feel that shoulder protraction, that's where you want to stop the measurement. Okay, so if you're playing along with me here, get your goniometer, put the axis of rotation right there at the elbow. And this time we know we're going forward, so I'll just get that movement arm out of the way a little bit, okay? And I've got kind of a side view here, so forgive me if it doesn't look right to you guys. So now I'm going to tell him to slowly move his arm forward. Since I am here in person, I'm going to feel it. So he is hypermobile. Okay, right there, back up a teeny bit. And then I'm going to hold his arm to support there. So this is unusual because most people do not have this much internal rotation. It could be from any number of things. There could have been a previous injury. He could have torn muscle fibers completely and there's no pain associated with it. But regardless, I've made sure that his elbow joint remained at 90 degrees, that it wasn't collapsing in or going out. I'm going to come back here, just put my little goniometer back so that the stationary arm, and I know it's hard to see, is straight up and down. And then I take this movement arm once again to the wrist there. Okay, double check to make sure I've got it right. And then go ahead and relax. And let's see if you see what I see. 54 degrees, see? Okay, so with internal rotation, the norm is 40 to 60. So he's good to go. If we wanted to do any type of strength training and internal rotation, there's no reason that he cannot. The other thing is it may be different from one side to the next. So you may be doing unilateral workouts where one side is working more on range of motion. Actually, I'm going to take back what I was about to say. I was going to say that you can be doing range of motion on one side and strength training on the other, but I'm going to take that back because I want to get both arms equally yoked before I start strengthening. What you can do, however, is isometrics so that neurologically you're still getting some firing of the muscle fibers without adding a load. Then you start strengthening them both simultaneously. And you may be dealing with this with amputations, with any type of reconstructive procedures. It is not uncommon that somebody won't be able to use a limb, whether it be an arm or a leg. So we don't want to train the other side with resistance. But yes, we want them moving. We want them doing flexion and extension and plantar and dorsiflexion and elbow extension, all of those things to just, keep everything firing as it should. Let me check the chat box real quick here. Okay, did you say we would still work with the functional side? So continue with range of motion. So Nikki, I'm gonna try and understand that. As I just explained what I said, did that answer the question you just wrote? Okay, all right, if you still have more, because I'm not real good at, do you wanna unmute yourself? Because I can't read your lips. No. Okay, let's see if I can unmute you. Okay, there you go.
So I asked I typed in the question before you answered it.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you did a great job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm muting you back up. We're going back
Okay.
to the Okay, guys. So we did flexion, and I know some of you jumped in late, so you can go back and watch the recording. I'll have it posted. It usually takes a couple hours for it to upload it, so I'll post it tonight. Then we just did external and internal rotation. Now I'm going to do abduction while he's still lying supine. I'm going to have to, and more than likely you are going to have to ask your client to have somebody else there with them, which will make it so much easier on you to move around the computer, because obviously it's going to be pretty hard for them to move their computer or phone or tripod around if they're lying down. So you can do these measurements, and I'll give you a real quick view of that upright if need be, and if that's the only way you can get it done. And maybe people don't want to go into their bed and have you, taking the range of motion measurements even virtually. All right, so let me reconfigure here. Okay. Whoops, hold on a second. I think I almost deleted somebody. Okay, so I'm going to have Jeff move over a smidge, and notice he's got this pillow underneath his head. We need to do some work on his neck. I mean, he's an engineer, he's at his computer all the time, so he does have the typical upper crust syndrome. So I don't want his head tilted back while I'm taking these measurements, so I'm supporting it so that it's level. Obviously, I don't want too high of a pillow that's gonna tilt his head up this way either. So with abduction, the palm is now upright, up facing upward, okay? The axis of rotation is at the armpit. So as you can see, this is going to be a difficult one for you to do virtually, maybe even impossible, to the point where you may just have to do this one upright, even if you do the other ones in supine position, okay? But I still want to show you how to do this, because if you're doing it in person, this is what it's going to look like. Make sure your movement arm is on top and the stationary arm is in line with his body. And you'll see these pictures in your book, which will probably be much clearer. When they're doing abduction, a couple things happen. One, some people will start to roll their arm while you're doing it. Now, a lot of people who have double joints and who are just anatomically predisposed to that, there's no way around it. But a lot of people, it's the process of them trying to force their arm up higher that they begin to rotate. The other thing that you want to make sure is that the upper arm, so the humerus, is staying in contact with the bed, the floor, the bench, whatever it is. We don't want to see them lifting up in order to get up to the desirable 150 to 180. So the 150 to 180 is the same with flexion and abduction. So what you guys are watching for is to make sure that his arm's not rotating excessively and that his upper arm, I don't care honestly what happens from the elbow down, it's the upper arm that I want in contact. And if you happen to be doing this with your client upright, you may want to have them stand against the wall, which can force them into proper positioning as opposed to just going freely in the air. All right, so here we go. So making sure my movement arm's on top, axis of rotation is literally right above the armpit. If you are doing this on a woman, particularly, someone who's just had breast cancer, just hover more. Don't press this down on their body, on their chest. Respect the space that you're working in. And then I want to make sure that his head is in alignment, that he's not tilting his head to one side or the other while I'm taking these measurements. And then Jeff, go ahead, nice and slow, bring that arm up towards your head, but not off of the bed. You're just sliding, telling somebody to do like a snow angel. So if you see how he's starting to lift up here? So I want him to back off. Did you guys see that? So as he starts to lift, the elbow comes off. That's no good. We want to come back to the point as high as he could go without this coming off. He's just trying to prove that he can go further. Okay, so now I come back, axis of rotation, movement arm, especially if it's someone who is, go ahead and relax, because usually this is not very comfortable for people, especially if it's a guy and they have big brawny arms, or a girl for that matter, or if it's somebody who is just a larger person. It's going to be really important to make sure that that movement arm is centered down their arm. Otherwise, it could be 10 degrees one way or the other. So in looking at this, I have 139 degrees. Okay. All right. So we know that the norm is, he knows the drill. We have one more though. Don't go away. Okay. I'm out of here. Norm is 150 to 180. So we have to be 90% of the bottom number at least before we start doing any strength training. So he's more than 135. He's what did I say? 139. So if there were such a thing as doing snow angels with weights or jumping jacks with weights, then he could do that. But think about this. What if somebody has limited shoulder abduction, okay? And you have them doing lateral raises to just up to shoulder height. What's going to happen? They're going to get really strong from 0 to 90, right? But that's going to make it a little more difficult to regain that full range of motion. And most people, unless you're a yoga instructor, and I say that in the most respectful way, that those of us who lift a lot of weights, more often than not, don't do a lot of stretches. And so personal trainers usually have some really terrible range of motion, at least all the ones that I've known, including myself, where, you have a yoga instructor do it and they're just like, yeah. So it just goes to show, you know, the importance of moving through full range of motion. And while I am not a physical therapist, I learned this from physical therapists, working with physical therapists. Even physical therapists or physiotherapists may do this a little different. Some of them will simply eyeball it. Some of them will only believe in doing it upright. Some of them will do supine measurements and then upright. For our purposes, because, you know, if you're a physical therapist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're a fitness professional, this is perfect for what we need to know, which is, do we focus on stretching or do we focus on strengthening? And when do we transition to strengthening? Because we know that just about everybody we're working with is going to need to be doing weight-bearing exercise, because we all do, to prevent osteoporosis. And that risk, of course, is elevated when we've got men or women that are, you know, women, of course, are in official menopause, but men have menopausal side effects from treatment. Chemotherapy will throw women into menopause. Age will throw women into menopause. And so a lot of these treatments, including things like corticosteroids, increase the risk of osteoporosis. So we know everybody needs to be doing strength training. It's just a question of when. Okay, so we started with flexion. We just did abduction. Both of those, the norms are 150 to 180. For external rotation, the norm was 70 to 90. And while you couldn't see while he was lying down, what I was saying is to make sure that this always stays at 90 degrees, that they're not doing this or this while you're taking the measurements. In internal rotation, again, just to give you a different view, when you see that, they've gone too far. It should be just as far as they can go. As you can see, I don't have great internal rotation, okay? And obviously you would be doing this sideways and it would be the same exact thing as when I was lying down. The same exact, except I go from this to this. So nothing's gonna change from lying down to upright other than the fact that they're working against gravity. So I'm going to finish off showing you extension. And this one, I'm going to show you how to do it lying down. However, you will probably not be able to take this measurement in this way virtually. You're going to have them stand up. But I want you to see how to do it when you are in person with somebody. So I'm going to have Jeff lie on his side facing that wall in somewhat of a fetal position. And I need to make sure that he is in alignment from his cervical vertebra all the way down to his coccyx. He's like, cool, I get to take a nap, finally. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. Now, he's a little too curled up and comfy, so I want to make sure that he's not collapsing. So when you're doing this in person, I don't know if you can see how his back's kind of arched in the thoracic area. It's a little excessive, so let's lower your legs a little, no sleepy time. Straighten out. Okay, now the axis of rotation is the same place. And don't get frustrated with me because I know you can't see this. I'm going to show you how to do it upright also. But I just want you to see how I'm doing this. His arm is by his side, okay? Just like flexion, okay? Palm is facing inward. But in this case, he's going backwards. So imagine if somebody had, again, a mastectomy, radiation, whatever, and they're trying to pull back against that. Imagine how difficult that would be. And then if they've had a lat flap reconstruction, now we're involving strength as well as flexibility because that lat muscle isn't there anymore. And you've got the lat and the pec and the implant all on the anterior, so you can see the imbalance and how not only is that going to affect posture, but also range of motion. So just like we did, you know, if he were to lay down, you would see that axis of rotation exactly where it was in flexion. But I'm going to kind of get out of the way here because otherwise I'm going to get hit. Now I would optimally be doing this standing, but then I'll be in your way. So the stationary arm is coming along the body here. The movement arm is going to move with his arm. What I need to make sure is that he doesn't roll his body when he's doing it, okay? So we want everything to stay linear, not to roll back. The other thing is that people tend to elevate their trapezius. And as promised, for those of you who are coming in the later part of this, I will go through these real quick upright before we head out for the evening. So don't panic. So Jeff, go ahead whenever you're ready, nice and slow. And you guys have a better view than I do. I want to make sure his arm's not lifting up, so keep it down, and that he's not starting to arch his back. So he's trying to push harder and harder. The stationary arm is in line with his body. The movement arm is going to his elbow. Okay, go ahead and relax. You can take a break, but don't go anywhere. He might take a little nap. Okay, so the norm is 40 to 60, and he is at 39. Now, to be honest with you, that was not an accurate measurement or one that I would write home about. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, you work with what you have. Just like we meet the client where they're at, on some level, you know, they have to meet us where we're at, which may be 3,000 miles away on the other side of the computer. So I showed you all these measurements lying down, most of them supine, because I want you to see how it's done in person. The one lying on the side, the last one, extension, you'll see all 5 of those pictures in your book, as well as measurements for the lower body. I have yet to do the measurements on the lower body because I've never had a client that it was even a concern for me. They didn't have lower extremity issues. Their gait, everything was perfectly fine. All right, Barb, we'll catch you later. But you know, you will have it there if you want to practice for lower body. Maybe somebody has lymphedema that's affecting their range of motion. I think, so Shelly, I don't know, Shelly Lang, if you're asking to speak, if it says ask to unmute, I don't know if that means you're requesting for me to let you speak, but if so, go ahead and unmute and talk. I want to, though, before you guys head out, I want to just show you real quick how you would do this in an upright position. So Jeff, let's just have you come back here. I'm scratching the bedroom floor, so. All right, go ahead. All right, let's back this up enough so that you can see him. And needless to say, you know, having a nice plain wall to do this on is much better. There's a lot of distraction going on here, but this is what you're going to deal with when you're doing this virtually. And I assure you that it's better to do it than not to do it. So Jeff, go ahead and just stand right here for me. Okay, now unlike the postural assessment, which we're going to do Tuesday, postural assessment, I'm going to ask them to take their shoes off. It doesn't make any difference for doing this. So if you have your goniometer, now you can practice with me because you're going to have the same view. So I want the palm, we're only going to do one arm, hon. So look straight ahead, just neutral. Palm is facing forward. And what you're going to have to really watch for, let's make sure you can see his whole arm here, as best you can, is to see if he's, you know, and then shifting in order to get all the way up. So of course, if you had him standing against a wall and if there was better lighting, it would be much easier to see. Axis of rotation right here, okay? The stationary arm is in line with his body. And then very slowly, I'm going to tell him to bring his arm up just like a snow angel, giving him cues like don't allow your shoulder to rotate. Don't tilt in that other direction. If you notice, see how he's starting to tilt his head? So we're going to come down a little bit so that he is centered. So if you're following with me, go ahead now. Put your stationary arm straight down. Take your movement arm to the elbow joint. Okay, is it perfect? Well, we probably will never know unless we're doing it in person. Okay. And then now I know this is less than what it was when he was lying down because it's only 105 degrees now. So do you see the difference between having to lift up and work against gravity as opposed to lying supine and not having to work against that invisible resistance, if you will. Looking good there with the mask, Pam. You must be out in public somewhere. Come back, Jeff. He keeps running away from me. Okay, so now to do flexion and extension, I need his side view, right? Okay, so axis of rotation is right here. I can feel that indentation, but you guys will just, you know, imagine it. And whether it be flexion or extension, the stationary arm is straight up and down. The movement arm for flexion is going to go this way. So I am going to cue him by saying, keep that arm as close to your body as possible. And imagine that you have 2 panes of glass on either side so that you can't move your arm in either direction. So go ahead and hold your goniometer, stationary arm pointing down, and then go ahead nice and slow, Jeff. Also making sure that they're not arching their back. And even though the axis of rotation looks like it's in a different spot, you're just holding it in the same place you started, okay? And then I take this, see, he just shifted because I could see his muscle contract, going right up to the middle of the arm, okay, guys? So if you're taking a measurement with me, that's what it looks like. Go ahead and relax. And we got, 136. So it was definitely a little bit less than what we got when he was doing it lying down. And so that's why I would notate that these measurements were taken supine versus these ones were taken in an upright position. Okay, extension, I'm going to do the same exact thing now. Looking to see if he's elevating his trap or arching his back. So slowly, Jeff, go back with your palm facing your body. Okay, and you guys, if you had good light, you would see this tighten up. So I would just tell him to lower it a little bit. Okay, and then I go right to the elbow. This is straight down. And in this particular case, I got 30. So you see it was about 10 degrees different than what we got lying down. Really important to distinguish and separate the two. And then lastly, he still wants to run away. I would have him bend his arm at 90 degrees and he's got to hold it. So this is going to be tough. You know, if you're working with somebody who just had surgery, they're probably not going to be able to hold their arm up here, but you would put the axis of rotation here. Stationary arm is parallel to the floor. And I'm going to instruct him to bring his arm backwards. Now, see, this is tough. If you had somebody there holding their arm up, it would be much easier. And then I just move this right up there. Okay. And he's at 81 degrees. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share with you guys also. I'm going to put this video from tonight in the Facebook group, but I'm also going to put one I did last week on all assessments. Just because I think the lighting is better for you. So I'll share the goniometric measurements from that one also in case you're having a hard time seeing this. Another thing that you can do before I finish off with the internal rotation, you can do an eyeball also on this one. So you can see how far up their back they can reach their thumb. Okay, or down. And that might be a better subjective way of doing it virtually if you don't feel that you can get really good measurements doing internal or external rotation. So let's just get you back here for one more. He's so over this. Our little girl's birthday is tomorrow, so we're going out to dinner after this. All right, last one. Face this way, arm out. So I would do the same exact thing, okay? Always making sure that movement arm's on the outside, but in this case, we're going downward. So go ahead, slowly, 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 slowly. I start to see him crank his shoulder. So there we go. Now I keep this one parallel. I move this one to the epiphyses of the wrist. Go ahead, you may leave us now. Thank you. All right, and he is at 42 degrees. So just to reiterate all this and give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. Hold on, let me move this so I can sit and chat with y'all. Okay. So some of you came in a little bit late, and this is so imperfect, and it will never be perfect because we're not in person. But it's good enough. It's good enough to give you just enough information to figure out, do we focus on stretching? Do we focus on range of motion exercises, or are we ready to dive into strength training? You're going to see a lot about compensations. You know, one of the things that as a fitness professional, I think is sadly overlooked, even for those of you who are personal trainers, a lot of people are not very personal. I don't think anyone in our group here falls into this category, but you know, when you look at a lot of younger personal trainers, they're doing bodybuilding workouts and HIIT and, you know, they're so focused on just muscular improvement and hypertrophy that they're not looking at form, and they're overlooking muscle imbalances. They're overlooking biomechanical issues and compensations. And we can't afford to do that when we're dealing with people recovering from cancer surgery and treatment. I think what sets our training apart from anything else out there is how particular this gets in terms of identifying, you know, range of motion, identifying muscle imbalances. So we'll get into the postural end of things now, Tuesday instead of Thursday, because I have to leave the fiery Portland. This is Kaya. Say hi, Kai. She wants attention too. It's dinner time. So, oh, now the whole family's coming in. They're like, time's up, Mom. Here's the birthday girl and the kitty cat. So, happy celebration, Ayla. Thank you, guys. So anyway, I will get this posted. Everything is also in your book. There's also a video on goniometric measurements done on a massage table. I have dark hair in it, so it was done a few years ago. But you have all different ways of seeing how this is done. I wanted to do this way on purpose because many of you will be doing it virtually, and it's not going to be perfect like it is when you're there with the table and everything in place. They're going mad. It's like, dinner time, can we go? So let me take a moment. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer it for you. Otherwise, thank you for being here. Remember that I will not be with you Thursday. I am on a plane out of the fiery wrath of Portland hell. And so I think my flight's at 9 o'clock, so I won't be able to make it, but I have rescheduled it for Tuesday. So you're with Dan Monday, and then we'll do 1:30 Eastern time on Tuesday. The other thing I learned about this is keeping one time all the way across the board, because we tried to accommodate everybody, East Coast, West Coast, Bahrain, United States, Australia, but it's just been really confusing. So I apologize for that. I don't see any questions. So no class at all on Thursday. You guys are off. That has been rescheduled to the following Tuesday morning. And it's actually really cool. I will be in Colorado and picking up one of my colleagues who works with me, and many of you will have seen her in our group, Shannon Burrows. So she'll be the subject for postural assessment, although she doesn't know that yet. So Kelly, if you have any questions, or if anybody else has questions, feel free to ask them now, and or shoot me an email. If you have any questions, frustrations, concerns, just write me at cetiguru@gmail.com. Don't waste any more time trying to figure out where this is and where that is. Just come straight to me, hop on a phone call, and I will walk you through it. So thank you guys all for being here. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week, and look forward to talking to you from someplace where I can breathe. He is a trooper. All right, guys. Bye-bye.